Ladies and gentlemen, for the second straight season and just the 10th time in Sacramento's history, the Kings have secured a 500 record. We did it, everybody. High fives all around. Round of applause. Sacramento is average. Just the 10th time in 39 years. The Kings are average, baby. We did it. How exciting. In all seriousness, after the blunder of Wednesday night's loss in Washington, D.C., what a gritty, gotta-have-it victory for Sacramento in Orlando, defeating the Magic 109-107. We're going to break the game down, including Malik Monk doing Sacramento a major favor without scoring a single point. I'll explain right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for instant deposit match up to $100. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. Of course, the vibes much better today on Locked On Kings than it was on Wednesday night. Like I said, just a gritty, grinded out victory. A win that, look, the way this game was played, a defensive battle between two, what we believe to be playoff teams. The Orlando Magic are fifth in the Western or Eastern Conference right now. They're on a 5-game win streak coming into tonight's game. They're a more established playoff team at this point than the Sacramento Kings are. Now, of course, the Magic have the benefit of playing in the East. The Kings are in the wild, wicked West. But the Magic, they're a legitimate playoff team, a good defensive team. Both the Kings and the Magic both have top 5 defenses in the month of March, right? This was a grinded out, physical, slugfest style game that the Sacramento Kings won. Had they lost, honestly, there would have been no shame in losing this game to the Magic the way it was played, right? It went down to the wire. It was a heck of a battle. Both teams threw punches. Both teams had slow stretches. Both teams had great stretches. It was back and forth. No team really pulled away that much. I think there were 15 lead changes in this game, right? It was just a start-to-finish war between these two teams. Which, by the way, remember, the Kings beat the Orlando Magic in Sacramento in overtime earlier on this season when Paolo Banchero went for a career-high 40-plus points in that game. So, two very evenly matched teams. Had the Kings have lost this game, on its own, there's no shame to losing to the Orlando Magic, right? But because of Wednesday, because of that Kings loss to the Washington Wizards, you hear in sports talk and the cliches, and it's overused, like a must-win game, right? It's overused in sports podcasts and sports conversations. Of course, I've used it far too many times here on Locked On Kings. So I won't say that tonight's game was a must-win, but it's in that must-win conversation, meaning this game had tremendously high stakes, and the Kings kind of had to get the job done tonight because of how much they failed on Wednesday. Because look, the Phoenix Suns played the San Antonio Spurs, beat the San Antonio Spurs tonight. Because of that, they're in sole ownership of the 6th seed. The Kings and Mavericks tied half a game back of them in 7th and in 8th. But on top of that, right, the Dallas Mavericks play the Utah Jazz on Monday, while the Sacramento Kings are hosting the Philadelphia 76ers. So far more likely that the Mavericks win their game against Utah than the Kings win their game against Philadelphia, even in Sacramento. And then the very next night, then the Kings and Mavericks will meet for their first of 2 straight games against each other. So those 2 games are obviously where the most is going to be decided in the standings, at least between the Kings and the Mavericks. But the last thing Sacramento wanted to do is go into that game on what would have likely been a 3-game losing streak, right? I'm going to be honest with you, based off of just the situations, based off of the 76ers struggles that they've been on as of late, and based off of the fact that Sacramento has really struggled against the Sixers consistently over the last handful of seasons. I don't have the highest of expectations for the Kings on Monday. So it felt like the Kings had in many ways to win this game, not only to make right and correct their mistake on Wednesday, but to give themselves a little more wiggle room in case things don't go well on Monday and they're not too far behind Dallas to where they need to win both of those games to have a chance to ultimately finish higher above Dallas in the standings. So this was as close to a must-win game without actually being a must-win game as it gets, in my opinion. This game, this victory, does not excuse the loss at all, right? Some of you might be listening to this podcast and rolling your eyes going, Matt, you look like you were doom and gloom 2 days ago. Now you're in a good mood. Well, yes, my emotional state sometimes goes with the state of the Sacramento Kings and the wins and the losses. I'm still frustrated, right? This, with a win in Orlando, this should have been a 3-0 road trip. Right, the easiest game of this road trip, and I say that, it might seem disrespectful. There's no easy game in the NBA, but the easiest game of this road trip, they lost to Washington. And the second night of a back-to-back was not an excuse in that game as we laid out. So it doesn't excuse the mistakes that the Sacramento Kings made, but what this does is this continues the pattern, right? The pattern of the Kings responding after bad losses with typically some good wins, and also playing better and playing up to a playoff opponent when they did not play as well as they should have against Washington. We all know the Kings play the Wizards on Wednesday the same way they played the Magic tonight. They win that game, maybe not easily because Kyle Kuzma had a 31-point game, but they win that game, right? We all know this, but for some reason Sacramento just struggles. But look, a lot of great individual performances in tonight's game, which we will get to, but I want to start with the Kings defense because first off, they got a really good defensive stop on Paolo Banchero with 2 seconds left to make sure he forced a very, very tough three. I don't know if that was what the Magic drew up, but they went for the Hail Mary win at home, and it failed miserably, but great defense by the Kings there. The Kings had a lot of great defensive moments in this game, but here's what I want to point out. The Sacramento Kings only held their opponents to under 110 points in regulation, not including overtime, in regulation 13 times in the first 63 games, right? So only 13 of the first 63 games did the Kings hold their opponent under 110 points. That is nothing, especially considering that the Kings in regulation have now held their opponents under 110 points scoring for 7 straight games. They're in a really, really good stretch defensively right now. They figured some things out. They're playing hard on that end of the ball. What I'm wondering is, and what I think a conversation that needs to start happening in Kings circles, are we leaving it's just a good defensive stretch, the Kings are playing good defense right now, and entering the Kings have figured something out and this defense is getting kind of legit, or is entering that for real category? Because look, the Kings showed in the playoffs last year that they could play good, hard, physical defense, but they also showed that they could do that in the playoffs when, as we know, officiating is a little bit lightened. They let a little bit more go. The stage wasn't too big for the Kings defense. Defensively, the Kings did what they needed to do in that 7-game series against the Warriors, other than stop Steph Curry for going for 50 points in Game 7 to win that series, right? They did not lose to the Warriors in the playoffs because of their defense. They did it because their offense didn't necessarily step up. But we were waiting to see, would that defense carry over into this season? And there have been moments, there have been times, but it hasn't been consistent. Now we've got 7 straight games. We've got basically the entire month of March that the Kings are playing not just great defense for them, top defense in the league, right? It's a small sample size. Like I mentioned, the Kings are a top 5 defensive team in the month of March. Of course, there are a lot more months before March that matter too. You can't just throw all those out. But if the Kings were to hold their opponent to 109 points per game for an entire season, they'd be a top defense in the league, period. Now, of course, where did things change? A lot of people are going to point to Keon Ellis, and rightfully so. Keon Ellis, once again tonight, he did his job defensively. 2 steals and a block tonight. As much as I want to continue to hyper-focus on the defense, though, because the defense for the Kings as a whole was really, really good tonight, when talking about Keon Ellis, I thought his offensive impact on this game was the key, or one of the major keys, to Sacramento's victory. Keon Ellis in this game, 19 points, 4 of 9 shooting from three-point range. To be honest with you, I almost like the 9 attempts more than I like the 4 made threes. Because that shows that, 1, the Kings are getting him looks, 2, he's taking those looks without hesitation, and 3, he's making those looks. Because you best believe, assuming Keon Ellis is going to be playing major minutes for the Kings in the postseason, whether it's play-in or playoffs, which, of course, why wouldn't he at this point? Teams are going to dare him to shoot and are going to risk giving him space on the perimeter instead of a Fox or a Keegan Murray or a Malik Monk or other players on this roster. He has to be ready to take that shot. He has to be willing to take that shot without hesitation, and hopefully he can have consistent games like he had tonight where he's knocking down a decent percentage of those looks. Do I think he's going to get 9 of them a game? I don't know. I don't think expecting Keon to score 19 points a night and shoot 4 of 9 from three-point range, that's not necessarily fair. But if he is knocking down threes at a rate that you have to respect defensively, while on the defensive end making the impact that we know that he's able to make every single night, that Keon Ellis Island impact, like, the Kings obviously have something here. He also had 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and didn't turn the ball over. I mean, offensively, this is the best game we've seen from Keon Ellis, period. Defensively, he's probably had better, more noticeable, impactful performances. Defensively, probably had better statistical performances. But again, here is a situation. Here is a night where Keon was impactful on defense, did what he does on the defensive end of the floor, and then stepped up in an offensive way when the Kings really needed it. Because one guy in particular had a really rough night. That was Malik Monk. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about De'Aaron Fox too. 31 points tonight, 10 of 22 from the field, 8 rebounds, 3 steals for De'Aaron Fox. He was just as active, just as engaged, and at times even more impactful defensively than Keon Ellis was. We know De'Aaron, I mean, he's one of the best in the league in deflections. He's close to the top of the league in steals. I think he has like 16 now straight games or something like that where he's recorded at least 1 steal. De'Aaron Fox has made tremendous growth defensively before our eyes. He doesn't have as many opportunities to show himself as an elite lockdown defender as Keon Ellis does, or maybe opportunity is the right word. He doesn't show it as much because of the focus and the attention and the effort that he has to put in on the offensive end of the floor. But we know De'Aaron Fox is capable of playing really, really good defense when the Sacramento Kings needed it. They needed it tonight. And then, of course, offensively, he led the push with his 31 points. Now, there's a play that I actually want to focus on for De'Aaron that was good in the moment and great in the moment, but I think a lot of people are not going to pay attention to or talk about as much. I imagine I'm going to be the only show that talks about this play in detail. After Chris Duarte had one of the worst closeouts I've ever seen of a three-point shot, just basically tackling whoever made the shot. I can't remember if it was Cole, Anthony, I don't know who it was. But basically just tackled the dude. He hits the shot. He banked it in, believe it or not. It was a 4-point play. The Magic had used the end of the third quarter and completely shut the Kings down, held them basically scoreless or without a field goal for like a 5-minute stretch to come storming back. They take a lead on that play, and the Kings are not necessarily unraveling, but it's like, oh God, here are the Orlando Magic at home. They've battled back. They have all the momentum going to the fourth quarter. And then De'Aaron Fox hits a buzzer beater 3 to tie the game up. I think it was at 81. A buzzer beater 3 heading to the fourth quarter. Now, it wasn't quite as impactful as his buzzer beater 3 the last time he was in Orlando when he did it from over half court to win the game. But still, I thought that play was massive for Sacramento to stop the bleeding or to stop the Magic from carrying any kind of momentum or significant momentum heading into the fourth quarter, right? The Kings, that shot quieted the crowd and kind of snuffed out that Magic push, and it helped kind of settle things down for what would end up being a back and forth heck of a battle of a fourth quarter. I don't think that shot should be understated. That was a massive shot by De'Aaron Fox. He had 12 points in the fourth quarter. According to Frankie Cardicelli, this is the 22nd game with 10 or more points in the fourth quarter, which leads the NBA. He also has the most fourth quarter points in the NBA since January, and I think he's like top 2 or top 3 fourth quarter points, period, this season. Clutch Fox, fourth quarter Fox. We're used to this, right? I just talked about that positive, right? That big 3 that he hit, and I want to make sure he gets credit for that. There's no but to it. However, for the second straight game, I thought De'Aaron Fox was still doing way too much from the three-point line. As much as I loved that shot, and as much as I understand that in a game like this where others were struggling offensively, like you're going to live or die, you're going to ride it out with De'Aaron Fox. But there was a point in this game, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was late fourth quarter. I think the game was tied or something. De'Aaron pulled up for a middle of the shot clock, deep three-pointer like he was Steph Curry. I know you've been signed to Steph Curry's brand, De'Aaron, but that's not your shot. It was just a bad shot from De'Aaron, and he barely reached the rim, right? He front-rimmed it very short. He took 12 three-pointers in this game, went 3 of 12. So 1 of 4, by the way, in the fourth quarter. So 25% in the fourth quarter. So 12 of his 22 shots, over half of his shots, were from the three-point line. I understand the Magic, a physical defensive team. Teams are game planning to crowd the paint and suffocate the paint a little bit against Sacramento and force them to shoot because of how much they like to get downhill, and they're aware of Mike Brown's pillar of his offense, which is paint touches and spray threes. So it's what other defenses are doing. It's not just De'Aaron being lazy and just chucking threes. But he's now taken 27 threes in the last 2 games. It's too much. It's too much, right? It worked out tonight. It's fine. It's not anything to harp on, but that's just, to me, that's just not De'Aaron Fox at his best. Thankfully, they were able to overcome it. Fox did hit some big shots. He had that massive floater that he was fouled by Jonathan Isaac. We'll talk about Jonathan Isaac in a little bit because he was phenomenal tonight. So he had great moments, and his shot selection doesn't ruin his game for me in any means. But I think it's worth talking about, and I think it's worth bringing up because I love that he's added a three-point shot to his game. But if sometimes he goes overboard with the three-point shot, I feel, to where it takes away from what he does best. And most of the time, his shot selection is fine. He takes good looks from three. They don't necessarily always drop. That particular 3 that I brought up, terrible shot selection at a bad moment. Thankfully, the Kings were able to overcome it. But had they lost, that would have been a big moment that we talked about. Malik Monk didn't score a single point for the Sacramento Kings. And yet, in kind of a silly way, I think he did the Kings a favor. I'll explain in just a second. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and it's just you against the numbers. You pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Right now, it is Demon and Goblin time on Prize Picks, but the demons are what you really want to pay attention to. Demons are these little more risky statistical categories. For example, maybe the standard prize pick for De'Aaron Fox was more or less than 27.5 points. The demon might be 29.5 points. Well, if you hit those demons, you get even better payouts. Now up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. And if you want to play alongside Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, you can now do so in the community plays. There's just a lot of ways to get connected to people and play in different ways on Prize Picks. Plus, you get quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy app. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100, meaning you deposit $100, you get another $100 on top of that. You deposit $50, you get another $50 on top of that. It's more money for you to make even more money on Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. 0 points, 0 of 11 from the field, 5 assists for Malik Monk. If you had told me coming into tonight's game that Malik Monk wouldn't score a single point, I would have told you how bad did the Kings, or I would have asked you how bad did the Kings lose by. It's pretty awesome that the Kings were able to win this game with Malik struggling this much. And really, where Malik goes is where the bench goes. And the Kings bench got obliterated by the Orlando Magic bench 49-7 in this game. When Malik's not scoring, that second unit is struggling to score, of course, the Kings are shorthanded. No Kevin Huerter right now, no Trey Lyles right now, Sasha Vezenkov still out, so that plays a large factor as well. Thankfully, the Kings starters stepped up. I already talked about how great of games De'Aaron Fox and Keon Ellis had. I'll talk later in the podcast about the great games that Keegan Murray and Domantas Sabonis had. We'll get into all of that in just a second. But even with Malik not scoring a single point, in kind of a weird way, I think he kind of did the Sacramento Kings a favor. What I mean by that is, Katie Christensen said on the Kings broadcast, if you were listening, she talked about they were waiting for Mike Brown's pregame press conference. And kind of the way it works, a peek behind the curtain is there's a set time that Mike comes to speak before every single game. So we go there and we sit in the press conference room and we just kind of chat it up amongst ourselves until he shows up. Well, Katie is in Orlando, obviously on the broadcast, and is waiting for Mike Brown, and you're interacting with the opposing team's media. We're usually just talking and asking questions about the other team and just having general conversation. And Katie shared that a lot of Orlando media were talking and asking about Malik Monk and expressing their desire or interest in the Orlando Magic to pursue Malik in free agency this summer. Brendan Nunez and I, in this very room, in fact, last week, talked about we think the Orlando Magic are the biggest threat to the Sacramento Kings to steal Malik Monk away from them in free agency. They have money. They have cap space. They might be willing to make a big overpay in order to bring him to Orlando. Makes a lot of sense for them in many ways. So Malik, in his Orlando showcase game, didn't score a single point. Now, Malik said on Twitter, he actually tweeted this, you can go and check it out. He said, "I couldn't throw a rock into the ocean tonight." And he's right. And I appreciate the accountability from Malik Monk. All frustrations with Malik tonight were clearly with himself. He just could not hit a shot. Again, I don't think that the people actually making the basketball decisions in Orlando are going to be swayed by one bad game from Malik, especially when he's the runaway to win Sixth Man of the Year, and he's absolutely been phenomenal this season. Like, everybody's paying attention to it. So this is all said kind of as a joke, kind of in jest, of course, right? But thank you, Malik. Appreciate you adding even the slightest potential bit of hesitation to Orlando potentially snatching you away. Now, you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see on the side of the screen I have Malik Monk sandbagged his Orlando showcase. If you aren't familiar with the sandbag term, it's a golf term, meaning like you're intentionally playing poorly. He's not doing that, right? If Malik would love a bidding war. Malik would love the Orlando Magic to throw a massive bag at him and force him to make a tough decision where you either take the money and go to Florida or stay in California and take what the Kings can offer you and stick with Mike Brown and stick with De'Aaron Fox. Speaking of Mike Brown, too, Mike was asked about Malik. I think Chris Biederman from the Sacramento Bee asked him about Malik and his interactions with Malik, and Mike talked about, like, he and Malik are going to get into it, but they don't take it personally. They respect one another. I genuinely think, and this is even with his best friend from college, De'Aaron Fox, here in Sacramento, I think Malik's relationship with Mike Brown is the most important relationship that's going to have the biggest factor in Malik's decision to stay in Sacramento or leave. I don't think he's ever going to leave because of his relationship with Mike Brown. What I mean by that is, if Malik is choosing between the Kings and, say, a Magic team who's throwing more money at him, one of the biggest factors, in my opinion, to swaying Malik to stay here in Sacramento will be his relationship with Mike Brown. So I thought that quote before the game was really cool and really interesting. And then Malik goes out, has his worst game probably of his time as a Sacramento King, at least scoring the basketball offensively. I don't think there's been a game that he hasn't scored a single point yet as a King. Could be wrong. I can't remember one. I can't recall one. Regardless, I guess this was the right opponent to do it against, and the Kings won the game regardless, so it's fine. It's all good. So shout out Malik Monk there. Like I mentioned, the Orlando Magic bench decimated the Kings bench tonight. 1, because Malik wasn't scoring. 2, because Jonathan Isaac was scoring. I have been a fan of Jonathan Isaac for a very long time. The basketball player. I know off the court he's a little, he has his things. Jonathan Isaac, in so many ways, guys, is exactly what the Sacramento Kings have been looking for and wanting forever. Like, he is a elite lockdown defensive wing who is guarding Domantas Sabonis tonight and doing a great job, right? He is a versatile defender. The biggest thing standing in Jonathan Isaac's way is his health, because he has suffered some pretty catastrophic injuries over the course of his career, and he has missed a lot of time. That being said, as we saw tonight, do I think Jonathan Isaac is a 25-point, 10 of 13 shooting, 3 of 4 from three-point range, 7 rebound, 1 assist, 2 block player every single time he plays if he stays healthy? No. Like, this was a massive game for him. But he's capable of having nights like this. And he's capable, more than capable, of making the defensive impact that he made. He changed the game early on when he came in. Right? The Kings were rolling pretty early, and then the Magic went on a big push. And in many ways, the way like Malik makes an impact on a game, or Keon Ellis has made an impact and a quick change for Sacramento when he comes on the floor, that's what Jonathan Isaac did against the Kings tonight. Jonathan has 1 season left on his contract after this season. It's a non-guaranteed season worth $17.4 million. I think he's going to make a major impact for the Magic in the playoffs this year. I'm very excited to watch the Magic in the playoffs this year because I think they're very entertaining and they're very fun, even if I don't like their interest in Malik. I have a hard time believing that wherever Isaac goes, he won't cash in completely on that full $17 million. Of course, if he gets hurt, then there's like there's certain times that the Magic have before that contract becomes guaranteed. So this is just completely spitballing and throwing it into the wind here, but like the Kings won't be able to acquire Jonathan Isaac in free agency this summer. Plus, they wouldn't have the money to do so anyway. But if there is ever a trade scenario or trade possibility in the future where the Kings could go out and potentially get Jonathan Isaac, I am all freaking for it. I'm telling you. I know, again, off the court, he's got his political beliefs and things like that, and honestly, it's nothing like he's doing things illegal or horrible or anything like that. If you don't like him as a person and his political beliefs and stuff like that, that's fine. But as a basketball player, in so many ways, he's exactly what the Sacramento Kings need. I would have zero hesitation at all, other than what are you giving up to get a player that's been injury riddled to bring him to Sacramento? I also trust that Monty wouldn't do anything foolish and oversell to get him here. I have no idea if the Kings have any interest in Jonathan Isaac. I do. So I'm using my platform here to speak on it. But Jonathan Isaac was phenomenal in this game tonight. I would love to see him in a Kings jersey sometime. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the win is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Keegan Murray has been in a bit of a funk offensively, and we've been waiting for that offensive breakout game. It wasn't the 45-point performance that he had in Sacramento earlier on this season, but in some ways, I think it was just as needed or just as impressive. 22 points for Keegan Murray tonight, 8 of 12 from the field, 6 of 7 from three-point range. You love that. Also 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 blocks, making an impact shooting the basketball, still rebounding the basketball, which he's been doing a much better job in the month of March. And then also making his defensive impact with a couple of blocks and just some solid defensive moments overall. It's the question with Murray breaking out of his offensive slump that he's been in and has gone through a couple times this season. It's never been about can he get back to or can he explode again for a 30 or 40-point game. The Kings would love that, and they certainly could use that in the playoffs. But what's more valuable to the Sacramento Kings, especially entering playoff time, is if Keegan Murray can become the guy that is, you can like basically pencil in means you can erase it. You use permanent ink. You can permanently write in like 17 points a game. If Keegan can be that guy, string together a consistent, a long stretch of games where he has like 17 points or more going into the remainder of the season and throughout the playoffs, right? That to me is what the Kings need the most out of Keegan right now. Now, you don't want him to sacrifice his defense. You don't want him to sacrifice his recent rebounding success in order to achieve those 17 points. And a game like tonight shows that he's capable of that. But Keegan has only scored 17 or more points 3 straight times once this season. He's had a number of games where he's done it 2 games in a row. But for the most part, Keegan will have a couple big scoring nights, and then it's back down to the low teens and barely double digits. So I don't think it's unrealistic to make that request of Keegan if I'm Mike Brown, right? Especially with Kevin Huerter out, and who knows how long Kevin Huerter is going to be out. Keegan, your defense has been phenomenal. We're going to continue to ask for a lot from you on that end of the floor. Your rebounding has been so much better. We're going to continue to expect that from you every single game. Scoring-wise, though, we need the consistency and reliability of 17 points a night. Can you give that to us? If he does, let's say, a best-of-7 series again against whichever opponent, if he does it 5 times in those 7 games, that's fine. Misses it a couple of games, like maybe 16, 15, 14, a couple of games. I think the Kings can survive that. The reverse, though, can't be the thing. You can't get only 2 games of 17-plus points from Keegan Murray in a best-of-7 series and hope and feel good about your chances of winning unless De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and Malik Monk are going crazy offensively basically every single night. The Kings are going to need steady scoring from Keegan. Maybe a game or 2 of him going off and going crazy. That would be great. But more importantly for this Kings team, in my opinion right now, steady offensive input. Steady 17 points a game or more. If he can do that, the Kings are in fantastic shape. Let's talk about Domantas Sabonis, too, really quick. 21 points, 7 of 14 from the field. I love that 14 number, by the way. I got on Sabonis on Wednesday night for only taking, 9 shots? He only took 9 shots on a game where offensively the Kings were struggling. Number 1 and 2 were just as shorthanded as they were in tonight's game. No Sasha, no Huerter, no Trey Lyles in that game either, and Sabonis only found 9 shots. Tonight, he found 14 of them. That 14 number is only 5 shots more, but those 5 shots make a difference. He shot 50% from the field. That gives him 20-plus points. He's one of 3 Kings to have 20-plus points tonight. Also 14 rebounds and 8 assists. So with the double-double, that's now 53 straight. Why is that number significant? Because that ties Kevin Love for the longest double-double streak in NBA history. Sabonis has tied it. That means Monday against the 76ers, he'll either take the streak for himself, he'll become 1 of 1, or he'll end tied with Kevin Love and have another crack at it next year. We'll see. But Domantas Sabonis is phenomenal. He also, I think, broke his double-double, total double-double record in a season. Last season, I think it was 65 with the Kings. Tonight, I think he got his 66th this season. So, I mean, he's just been unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. And he's going to get Kevin Love's record on Monday. I'm not afraid of jinxing that. He's going to get it. He's just that dominant statistically, unless, knock on wood, he gets hurt, which that shouldn't count anyway against him. Regardless, a couple more numbers I want to talk about quickly before we wrap up. A couple of them bad, most of them good. Let's get the bad out of the way. For the second straight game, the Kings struggled to score in the paint. I think they had 34 points in the paint against Washington tonight. Just 32 points. Only 31 of their 87 shot attempts were inside the paint. Again, defensively, I think this is a game plan. Like, teams are packing the paint defensively against Sacramento and forcing them to beat them from three-point range. On paper, coming into this season, you would think that would have been a terrible strategy because of how many three-point weapons the Kings have on this roster. But like Jason Ross and I discussed yesterday, just because they have a lot of three-point weapons doesn't mean they're a great three-point shooting team. They've lived and died, more often than not died, from the three-point line at times this season. They typically lose games when they're not hitting their threes. So teams are daring them to shoot it and not letting Fox and Sabonis and Monk to have their way in the paint and get downhill. But the Kings still, even with defenses emphasizing that, you need to come up with more than 32 points in the paint. You're going to be in big trouble, I think, in the playoffs if that's all that you can muster. Also, the Kings, for the second straight game, got out-rebounded pretty handily. 49-42, they were out-rebounded. The Orlando Magic had 12 offensive rebounds in this game, including 3 straight offensive rebounds with a chance to, I think it was to take the lead late in the fourth quarter. They got 3 different cracks at it, or maybe it was to tie the game. Regardless, they got 3 different cracks at it and missed all 3, which you give an NBA team 3 opportunities to score in 1 possession. Most of the time, they're going to score eventually. So the Kings got to clean that up because we know how much that bit them in the butt last season in the playoffs. So the Kings got to figure that out. But now to the good, right? A couple things in the good category, and we'll end on a positive note after this win. 26 fast break points tonight. That is Kings basketball. They got out in transition, got up and down the floor, got good shots because of it. 26 fast break points. You'd love to see that. Only 7 turnovers, despite the fact that they were playing fast. They were trying to get up and down. It was a physical defensive game. The Kings took care of the basketball. You love to see that too. Plus, it limited the Orlando Magic in scoring a lot of points off of turnovers. And finally, free throws. Keon Ellis did miss a clutch free throw. It was funny. It was like a Kings gauntlet that the fans got put through. The Kings gave up 3 offensive rebounds, somehow stopped the Magic from scoring in those 3 straight looks. Then the Kings went back the other way. Keon Ellis was fouled, went to the free throw line for 2 free throws, missed the first one, which kept it a close game for Orlando, and it gave them a chance to win it there at the end. But the Kings as a whole from the free throw line, 18 of 21, that's 85%. In a game that comes down to a couple of points, free throws matter oh so much. And there have been many games this season where it has been close that the Kings have lost because they were shooting in the 70s or a lot of times worse than the 70s from the free throw line. I think all of us are still contemplating or nervous about the inevitable game in the playoffs where Sacramento is struggling to hit their free throws and whether or not they're able to overcome that, right? Overall, a gritty, hard-fought, really, really impressive and crucial win for Sacramento tonight on Orlando. I'm glad they bounced back. Doesn't forgive what happened on Wednesday, but they bounced back. They're tied with the They're tied with the Mavericks. They're half a game back of the Suns in 6th. Now, where do you go from here? I don't have the highest of expectations or the greatest of feelings of that game against the 76ers on Monday. But I hope the Kings prove me wrong and get that win against Philadelphia, who has been struggling as of late. We'll see if they're able to do that, because after that, it's basically a 2-game mini playoff series. Kings, Mavericks. Tuesday night, Friday night. Can't wait for next week. Those games are going to be terrifying. Those games are going to be stressful. But those are the games we live for, especially in March, especially with the regular season still going on. We'll certainly take that versus the Kings paying attention and Kings fans paying attention to Tankathon and March Madness at this time of year, right? I appreciate your support so much here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. If you're going to the game on Monday, let me know. Hit me up. I'm at the top of Section 105. I'd love to meet up with you and chat with you and say hi. But until next time, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.